out against terrorism and against Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, like you are mentioning. But how big an instrument would this be if there is a clear delineation between the terror states, or the states that abet terrorism, and those states which do not, which are victims of terrorism in the real sense of the term, to mount international pressure on Pakistan?
Let me put it this way, that the world is more complex than just definitions of terrorism. For example, for many years the Americans condoned what the Taliban was doing. In fact, there was an Assistant Secretary of State who called the Taliban as a factor for stability, Robin Raphael. While at the same time the Russians were totally opposed to them. And the Russians and Indians were part of the Northern Alliance, backing them.
But there has been US Secretary of State earlier, Hillary Clinton, who said that you can't have snakes in your backyard.
Yes, so the American position is evolving in one direction. But at the same time the Russian and Chinese position is evolving in a different direction. They're not willing to classify the Taliban as a terrorist organization, despite the fact that at least the Chinese have faced some attacks. Russia till very recently did so. But then Russia is more and more coming under Chinese influence. So much of this is going to depend on the global parameters. But I think the West more or less is getting a bit tired of the Pakistani sponsoring of terrorism. If you notice comments when Sushma Swaraj was in America,
that's right,
very clearly we have defined Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Dawood
in
Ibrahim.
The declaration on combating terrorism.
And then
has been issued.
Yesterday, the Secretary of State Kerry, which is rather surprising because in the American establishment, I personally know he's more well disposed towards Pakistan than the others like Hillary Clinton may be. But even he brought in the name of the Lashkar-e-Taiba yesterday. So I think this
the joint declaration mentions it, and the US has already banned both.
Yes, but this he said it separately. He said this separately in the context of global terrorist organizations, and he named the Lashkar-e-Taiba, which I thought was quite different. So you're seeing a solidifying of the American position on this. But in an ultimate analysis, I'm a realist. Till the pressures on Pakistan grow so high that sponsoring terrorism becomes unaffordable, it's not going to end. But for the first time you have the Americans saying, and Kerry said this, that Pakistan must also realize that we regard meaning America regards both the Haqqani network and the Lashkar-e-Taiba as terrorist outfits.
Absolutely. I would like to underline that the joint declaration that was issued after the inaugural strategic and commercial dialogue mentions both Lashkar-e-Taiba as well as Haqqani network, and we know Haqqani network has targeted Indian assets, and not just Indian assets, US and NATO forces also now. But Mr. Parthasarathy, the Prime Minister today sought to make this point that once that distinction is drawn between those countries or forces that support humanity and those that support terrorism, it will be nearly impossible to defend this word good terrorism or good terrorists. And he said that that distinction simply does not exist.
The point is that nobody uses the term good terrorists.
But at the same time, there is this so-called peace process that is on, which is mediated by Pakistan as far as these good terrorists in Taliban are concerned.
But again, here you have a difference. For example, even the US is not averse to talking to the Taliban, but the US is averse to the Haqqani network. So, I think the present Afghan president is confused as to who's an Afghan terrorist and who's not, unlike Hamid Karzai. So we'll have to get these definitions clear, because yes, even if it is defined, the nuances will be maintained in every situation. So it's going to be a long, hard fight. But yes, as the Prime Minister says, if we arrive at a very clear definition, which we should, then certainly it becomes very, very difficult for a country to start giving protection to the likes of Hafid Saeed, who raves and rants against India and of disintegrating India every morning. And the same is true of the Haqqanis.
Now, since you said that it is the United States that now also has a problem with Haqqani network, which was not the case earlier when only Indian assets and establishments were being hit in Afghanistan, the Prime Minister today said that when the stock market was bombed in the United States, then the US State Department woke up to the reality of terrorism, whereas earlier they fashioned it as a mere law and order problem.
Yes.
Do you see double standards as far as
it was the attack on the World Trade Center in 1994. It came after the Mumbai attacks. You know, when the Mumbai attacks took place, the Americans had very substantial evidence. And incidentally, Nawaz Sharif was the Prime Minister then. Mumbai 1, I'm talking about. His first stint. That was his first stint, yes. The Americans had enough evidence to even declare Pakistan a terrorist state. But they chose not to do so. It was only in 1994 when Al-Qaeda elements and radical elements came and staged the bomb attack on the World Trade Center that the things changed. So I think the American position, as I said, every country wants to do this according to its national interests. Till then, the Taliban were good boys because they were negotiating a deal for Turkmen oil and gas. They were helping the American oil company Chevron, with which many people were closely involved.
Absolutely, and that reminds me of what Ban Ki-moon had said days ago when he said that countries need to rise above national interests in this fight against terrorism and violent extremism. Now, India has been pushing for a really long time for the conclusion of the International Convention Against Terrorism at the United Nations, but that has not seen the light of the day. Is that the real problem that you're talking about, that it's really difficult to define what terrorism is?
Look, even if you define, there will be shades of grey which people will bring in, unless you get to such a very clear definition that shades of grey go. But yes, it will be certainly a major step forward. It will be a major step forward.
Once this convention
Once the convention, UN convention is finalized. But countries like Pakistan, which are congenitally addicted to doing this, we'll have to wait and see how it goes out. Also, we'll have to see how the situation in Afghanistan plays out. Because if the democratically elected government gets destabilized, which there are increasingly signs that it is happening. I mean, today, Kunduz in northern Afghanistan has been attacked by the Taliban and virtually taken over. Then things can be difficult. It will spread to Central Asia. And also I find that this talk about ISIS is a bit of a red herring, because ISIS is in the Arab world, but the Shia Arab world starts from eastern Iraq and extends through Iran. So we are well buffered against the ISIS by these two. But it can come through Central Asia to Afghanistan, Pakistan.
Absolutely, but there were stray cases of ISIS recruits that had surfaced in India, but very, very few cases nonetheless. Now, let's come
I have total faith that in India, we are a secular society, people will not take to this form of extremism.
PM has very often expressed that
out of
in the past.
170 million, if 40 people do it, it's no big deal. It can happen anywhere in the world.
But we are largely buffered as well.
I think we are largely buffered also, and basically the innate quality of our people and our secular democracy.
Now, Prime Minister